I am exhausted. Let's talk about Alpha 3. Whew, we got a lot to get through this week, which is surprising for a game where you still can't change your resolution, so let's crack on, shall we? So you've all seen the thumbnail. The big standout feature this week is that you can change the environment. That might seem like a little bit of a stupid thing to focus my time on, you know, something that has very little bearing on gameplay. But I had to do this anyway for a number of reasons. The main one being I needed to separate out the environment from the geometry of the world so that I can play around with different terrain types without having to duplicate lighting conditions and stuff. So I figured if I'm doing that, I might as well have a bit of fun and add some different environments in there. It's a nice way to test the lighting. I've also massively improved lighting generally. There's been a lighting pass, so doing all these different environments was a very useful exercise for that. Now, I'm just going to jump into, I don't know, this night one. Now, one of the big things that's had to change with this, oh god, mouse control, let's turn you off. Okay, I'm just going to quickly go through this as well. I've been doing a bunch of work on the mouse control, mouse input stuff. It's now got dead zone, inverting, and sensitivity, and a bunch of fixes around sensitivity so that it doesn't limit your maximum turn rate. There's a couple of other things I need to get done but won't be in this build, I'm sorry to say. Power curve and relative rate. That'll be coming up next, I think. That's as much as I could do for this. So, let's have a quick look at this. So, obviously we've got a different scene in here now, which is nice, a dark scene. A lot of these scenes are quite dark. To accommodate that, I have added a ship light, which is L on the keyboard by default. You can change that to whatever you want. It might look a little bit dim at distance, but I promise you this light is bright enough to project 8K IMAX onto the White Cliffs of Dover. It's just that everything is massive in this game and it's very difficult to actually convey that yet. Now, one of the cool things that I've had to do for this is some tweaks to the fog. Now, in the first couple of builds, the fog is a uniform colour. That's like the inbuilt Unity uniform fog. Now, that means that if you have any kind of skybox that has a bright colour on one side and a dark colour on the other side, one of those sides is going to look crap. It's not going to work. So, after trying a whole bunch of different things, I did what any self-respecting indie developer does, and went to the Unity store and bought somebody else's hard work, using the money that you guys paid for Alpha 1, so thank you for that. So now you can see on this side where it's much darker, we're blending the skybox in with a post-processing shader. That means it's sampling the pixel color and using that as for the transparency pass-through, which means we can have nice bright shades on one side and dark, opposite side of where the sun is on the other side, and the geometry doesn't pop in anymore. You can't see this really obvious outline. It nicely fades in, and it's not particularly realistic, especially when the sun is behind a mountain that slowly fades in. But at least it's not distracting, and it smoothly animates in now, which is really, really, really satisfying. Okay, so there's a new terrain type in this. This is one of the main reasons I did any of the environment stuff in the first place, is to play around with different types of terrain. Okay, to get this terrain, pay attention to this, you have to go through the options menu. It's in the dev options tab on the right hand side, right at the bottom, enable experimental terrain. You probably can't see that because my face is in the way. There you go. So enable that, apply it, and go back to the main menu, or you can do this from the main menu, that's fine. And now free roam is using this V2 experimental terrain. Now the reason that I've got that hidden away is because it's still very much work in progress. I'm not entirely happy with it yet. I'm still kind of finding my feet about what works, what doesn't before anything gets finalized. The main changes to this terrain is that it is 4 times the height and has a much broader pass filter on it that makes it more varied and interesting. It also has a different noise filter pass that carves a bunch of canyons through it. It's not particularly realistic, but thankfully I'm making a flying game where you fly spaceships, and I'm not a geologist, and I don't care. This will take a little bit of time to load. It's a much bigger map, and there we go. Cool. So you can probably tell that these mountains are much taller than they were before, and you have these big canyons, big carved canyons that are cut through it. They don't go all the way to the floor, that's mostly fine. They are really interesting to fly through though. I wish that I could make them a little bit less straight. Ah, crunch. But I can't, so not for now anyway. I've tried a couple of different things, they all ended up with some various errors. Again, this is not final. I just want to get some feedback about how it feels, what's fun about it, what's not fun about it. So you can see like there's a big lump of variation here. This is a nice big flat area, and then we've got these huge cliffs that cut into like big craggy rocky terrain. It's just enough to keep it interesting, whereas before it felt very uniform. Very, very interested to hear what the feedback is on this. Now, having played around with this a whole bunch, it has necessitated some changes to the flight mechanics. Not a huge amount. All of the notes are in the patch notes, but suffice to say, it's a little bit easier to control and a little bit more forgiving with things like boost timers. I'm convinced it's going to change again because a certain somebody has finally got the game working and he has opinions, strong opinions. That I don't necessarily disagree with. Just beware that it's going to change again, and all of those times that you've been setting in the custom races, completely irrelevant, completely invalid now. You're welcome. Let's see, what else? There's been a general lighting pass that you've probably maybe noticed. I fixed the shadows in the cockpit. The shadows were really, really rough before. They would flicker quite spectacularly. That's been sorted now. And a big one, a really, really chunky one. So I have completely rewritten from scratch the flight assist system. Previously, it would do a whole bunch of kind of cheating where it would inject thrust to kind of level you out. It was a terrible approach, and I really shouldn't have even released it, to be quite honest. Now, what it does is it acts like a meta input layer. So there is nothing that it can do that you as a user without flight assist can't do. So it doesn't cheat, it doesn't pretend to inject things or play around with the thrusters. It sits on top of the ship, effectively, injecting input. So whenever you have flight assist enabled, your inputs, your stick, your mouse, your gamepad, whatever, they become targets from a maximum. So if I push my throttle halfway forward, it will target half of your maximum speed, and it will stick there. So let's quickly turn that on. And I'm at half speed now, roughly, I think. A little bit more. Okay, cool. So you can see that it's sticking at 327. I can now just gently turn it around and it will change my vector. Now, under the hood, it's doing everything it can to change the vector, and that includes using lateral and vertical thrusters. You don't even need to know about it. So it's actually the most efficient mechanism in the game right now to align yourself with your forward direction. So with that in mind, like, why would you ever not use flight assist? Well, the main one is that it has a small interpolation period towards the end, so as it gets closer to the target speed or rotation or whatever, it will slowly decrease the amount of acceleration, and that's to prevent overshooting and then coming back in and overshooting and coming back in. That means that, in theory, technically, you can accelerate faster without it, and you can turn faster without it, but it is so narrow. You basically have to be Sanders, but for us mere mortals, it's probably fine. So, that's cool. That also applies to your rotation thrusters as well, so I feel like this feels a hell of a lot more like Elite. And there is a sound effect now, as you probably heard before, for turning it off and turning it on, turning it off, turning it on. This is a temporary sound effect that I've just shoved in there. It's enough because I don't have an indicator in the cockpit to show you when something's turned on or turned off. Whee! So yeah, let me know how that goes, because I know a lot of you guys, particularly in the racing community, use a mixture of FA on and FA off, so really both have to be right before it's going to ever feel right to you guys. I don't tend to play with flight assist in Elite, so I'm kind of flying blind a little bit there. If you've got any feedback on that, I am absolutely all ears, because as I say, I have no idea. It just feels right to me now. And that is about it for this week. Next week I'm going to be going back to eating my damn broccoli. I'm going to be adding some graphics options, I think, some additional input options for the mouse, continuing to look at the Virpil situation. Input has been updated, the Unity Input Manager, so VJoy works now. At least that means that if your device doesn't work with this, you can pipe it through VJoy with joystick grambling or something. It is a massive faff, I wouldn't blame you if you were like, nah, I'll wait. But the option is there, so that's cool. Next week, yeah, I want to make some more game mechanics. I'm thinking like the ability to save your times and like a couple of levels baked in, but I don't want to go too deep into that hole because the flight model is still very much in flux. Cool, have a play, let me know what you think. As always, I am open to suggestions on the Discord. Have fun, peace.